Hey, Jenny.
Hi, Dean.
Okay, Jenny. So I've got questions. But before I get into questions, let folks know a little bit about you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Jennie Kaylie, a fractional CMO who focuses on future proofing brands by making them truly differentiated in the market. A little about my background. I came up on the agency side as a strategist with Y&R and Edelman, bringing younger customers to traditional brands like Sears, Miller Coors, and then bringing women to Axe Body Spray, if you can believe it. And that turned out to be an amazing education on solving real difficult brand problems, which I then took to the liquor and spirits industry at Jim Beam, which is really a worldwide competition to differentiate by storytelling.
Hmm.
And then after 5 years at PwC in customer experience consulting, a little bit of a pivot, I headed up Wayfair's integrated marketing team, working to differentiate Wayfair from Amazon through improving the customer experience and partnerships with the likes of Kelly Clarkson. And now I am a solopreneur, fractional CMO, and I help brands of all shapes and sizes uncover unmet needs, category white space, and essentially future proof themselves through brand strategy, integrated marketing, and customer experience innovation.
Well, then you're not going to be able to answer any of these questions at all. So we're done. Goodbye. Oh, yeah. Here's my hypothetical for this podcast generally. Okay. Um, you've signed a client as a fractional CMO, marketing strategist. And today's day one of a 1 year engagement. Brand new client, brand new company, brand new project, brand new everything. Okay. Today's day one. What does the first 90 days look like for you? Is there anything problems you normally go looking for, or things you try to get established, or a message you try to get out first, or even sort of, like what the discovery process looks like to sort of get your sea legs at a new client?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, high level, I think the first 90 days is really about building trust with the team
Hmm.
while quickly kind of assessing the company's marketing landscape, developing strategies to enhance performance. And then, the last 90 days is executing initial steps to drive results. So, it's kind of assessment, then strategy, then action in terms of the first, second, and third months. In terms of the first 30 days, that discovery and assessment, it's really understanding the business, the current stakeholders, marketing initiatives, what keeps them up at night. And I like to do this with one-on-one stakeholder meetings with the CEO, senior leadership, and even their direct reports that are going to be on the ground executing, and really understand the challenges. And the outcome here is really to align on those marketing priorities. And you'll be surprised. Sometimes they're drastically different according to which stakeholder you talk to. And that's really what a fractional CMO can come and do is they can unite some of the different priorities that people might have into
Right.
kind of a harmonious set of objectives that align everybody's agendas. And that's kind of step one. Part of this is, could be auditing existing marketing efforts. Obviously, it depends on the scope of your work, based on the aligned upon priorities. And if appropriate, even doing a team assessment as you're having the stakeholder interviews. What are the strengths and opportunities of each of the individuals and the leaders that you're speaking to? You might do a data and analytics review, evaluate the marketing activities, and then, once you kind of have your sea legs to your earlier point, then you kind of identify those quick wins, like the low hanging fruit, if you will, that can generate immediate improvements. Then when you go into the second 30 days, so, day 31 through 60, if you will, that's really strategy development and alignment. So you want to develop this comprehensive marketing strategy aligned with the business goals in month one. And this should be at least one, if not more, working sessions. People support what they help to create. So rather than doing it in a vacuum, actually meeting with those key stakeholders, the CEO or whoever you're reporting to might define as super important to execute the marketing strategy.
Hmm.
Maybe bake it 60%, but then bring them into a working session to help the other 40% because they know the ins and outs of the operational challenges and what it actually takes to get these jobs done. That way, you're not kind of mapping these huge ideas that might be really difficult or maybe expensive to execute. And then finally, in kind of the last 90 days, this is where you might begin executing the strategy. So if in the second, 60, I should have said the last 30 days, not 90 days, but if in the second 30 days, you're defining the marketing strategy, which might be brand repositioning, channel strategy refinement, maybe even developing creative strategy. This is actually getting into execution. So, what does the campaign look and feel like? How does that manifest in the different channels? Is there a
Right.
new product or service that you might need to launch to differentiate that brand? And then obviously, you want to think about the whole flywheel of marketing, not just growing awareness of the brand, but then enhancing lead generation, nurturing, and really establishing even a relationship with the sales team. I think that's something that CMOs miss quite a bit is just thinking about marketing in a vacuum, but not working with the sales team to say, okay, are these actually like qualified leads for my sales team? And what implications does this revision and marketing strategy have on that sales team? And you then want to set up monthly reporting and insights. I always say what you can measure, you can change. So create really easy to understand, like one sliders of reports that you just instantly get. They don't need to be eye charts, but it's like, what are those insights and implications for what you're going to do next based on the learnings from the campaign launch? And then obviously you want to build team morale, right? You want to share early wins and then how they align with the long-term strategy so you can move forward.
It's funny you should mention about the sales. In that, there's nothing funny about sales, to be honest. Well, when you like start a new type of anything, marketing or so on, or in this case, a podcast, um, after a while, like this is episode 123, like the demographics and psychographics start to like sort out, right? And LinkedIn tells me that while most of the audience are in senior management positions for this podcast, the biggest single group are heads of sales.
Yep.
Heads of sales watch a podcast, a lot of them, about fractional chief marketing officers. Um, I've never talked to a head of sales, or I don't know any of the. I mean, I've talked to lots of heads of sales. I never talked to a head of sales about this podcast to like see why. I imagine if you're in charge of sales and there is no chief marketing officer or no one in charge of marketing, you might be interested in finding a fractional one. You know, but yeah, you
Exactly.
never know, right?
Absolutely.
Huh?
Yeah, I would say that if you're not really in lockstep with the sales team, you can be very
Mm-hmm.
disliked as a fractional CMO with the sales team
Yeah.
because their heads are on the hook for those sales, and a lot of what you do really really affects them. So you
Yeah.
want to make sure they're in your working sessions. They're kind of not approving but consulting heavily
Mm-hmm.
with your marketing strategies.
Okay, so Zack, hi.
Hello.
Sorry to keep you waiting, sir. So, can you tell folks a little bit about you, and then what you normally try to do or go looking for in the first 90 days?
Sure. So my name is Zack Lemear. I'm a partner at Pivot Creative. I've been doing this kind of work for about 24 years. I've
Mm.
been probably in the fractional CMO space for more like 5 or so. Um, but I've been a brand strategist for a long time, and I focus a lot on the big picture strategy and how all the components fit. So in that first 90 days, yeah, there's a lot of overlap from what Jennie said.
Mm-hmm.
But I try to build rapport with the teams, right? Not just my team, but just like she was saying, with the sales team, with the other C suites, just trying to figure out again in the discovery and the audit phase. I want to figure out what their goals and their challenges are, and how close or far they are from those things. I want to establish. Sometimes I establish just kind of a micro vision and mission for the task, because the challenge with being a fractional CMO is that you're not there all the time. It's not a full-time position. And so you can't really impact fundamental change on every hour on the hour,
Right.
and so you've got to really make a big impact. You've got to make sure that you're listening. So I watch a lot and I listen a lot. And we want to, what market are they in? And we want to audit, not just what marketing are they doing, but where's the market saying? How, they're trying to penetrate, they're trying to be a leader, what are their goals? And when we figure this out and we build the rapport again with the sales team, because I agree 100% that, a sales team is empowered by great marketing and branding, because then they finally know what they're selling and they
Right.
know what to say consistently. And when they're all saying something consistently together, they're helping to build the brand, instead of all of them having their own loose interpretation of what they think they're selling, which may or may not be correct, but it might be even close, but it's not on the same page, and that's not building the brand forward. And I believe truly that nobody buys or sells anything but brands. And I really want to know who on the team should be doing what, and are they the right person in the right seat? Because a lot of times you'll have people doing a job, but they could be the
Mhm.
wrong person. They could be the right person in the wrong seat. And we want to make sure that they're enlightened and they're passionate about what they're doing. And it could just be a little bit of an organizational shift. Sometimes it depends on what's going on. And also it depends on the size and the scale of the organization that you're working with, because you might not have large teams that you're working with. You might have smaller teams, or they might be, people that are wearing many, many hats and they just need some help. Or in some cases, they'll bring me on to just kind of manage and audit and lead a creative team in that case. But it's really down to building rapport, watching and listening, really creating a good audit and a discovery phase, and understanding really what their goals and challenges are, and are they in alignment with what the market is saying, to just really try to get clarity. You want to be clear, you want to be focused, and you want to be consistent in everything you're doing in your branding and marketing. And you want to make sure that everybody is rowing in the same direction. That's why I kind of sometimes, depending on what their vision and mission is, and if everyone is on board with that, I will create a small one, just a micro one that's just for the marketing specific and the sales and branding. That's definitely in alignment with their goals and their challenges. I also, again, we said we want to meet all the teams related, because it's never siloed. It's never siloed. Everybody has, either they're wearing multiple hats or they're dedicated to their particular position, but we're all working on the same team in the same way towards the same goal. And if we're not, part of my job is to identify why and help fix as much as I possibly can at the highest level, to get us back rowing in the same direction. So, without breaking it down into day to day, I mean, that's really what my first 90 days are. And then execution, yet again, it depends on the size and the scale of the organization that we're working with. We might get the execution within the first 90 days. We may not. It really depends on also what kind of situation you're inheriting, and how easy it is to work with the key stakeholders as well. Because sometimes that's not a streamlined process. It's not easy. And sometimes they create friction, and maybe they've been the reason why the goals and the challenges are happening or not happening. So there's a lot of that usually has to go down. And sometimes there's hard conversations to be had, but also I want them to, especially the team that would be under me, to understand that I'm their advocate, so that they can, it's a safe space to challenge ideas, to create new ones, and if there's something that isn't going correctly, or if there's something that they find that's creating a lot of friction or anything like that, to lean on me to bring that to top tier leadership and make fundamental change if possible. So that, it could be something simple. It could be, again, right person in the wrong seat, wrong person in the right seat. Could be something as simple as that. Could be a goal that has been, visualized or envisioned by the CEO, but he's completely detached from how the reality is, and it might not be the right goal. And
Actually, let's talk about the CEO for a second.
sure.
Okay, so I'm going to enter this scenario. Okay, I'm the CEO of your client company, right? Today's day one still. And I say, Zach, you work with lots of CEOs. I've worked with very, very few CMOs. Uh, while you're here, what should I stop doing and what should I start doing to maximize what the company is going to get out of you while you're here?
Well, if that was the question that I got on first day, I would want to shadow that CEO
Mm-hmm.
for a day or two and see kind of what kind of decisions are being made, what kind of questions are being thrown at him or her, uh, and just kind of really get a sense of what the landscape is, what's the baseline here, and then I would have better understanding of what is going right, what isn't going right, what should be delegated, what should never be done, or I get it's a very open-ended question. So really, a million things could be happening here that could be great, and a million things could be happening that are not so great. So I think that it's really important to just shadow, and really, you can ask questions, but until you see the day to day, sometimes you get so much more data and so much more information from just watching and listening than you do trying to come up with the perfect question on the first day.
So, Jennie, let me reframe my question because Zach did a great job. I want like a different perspective. In your experience, because every company you work for has a CEO, what do they tend to do that helps a fractional CMO, and what do they tend to do that hinders a fractional CMO?
Yeah, that's a good one. I would say what's really helpful is radical candor. Be completely honest.
Mm-hmm.
I want to understand your greatest ambitions. I'm going to ask you about that on day one, your greatest fears, what's keeping you up at night. And I don't want you to hold back. If there's a potential acquisition that might be happening, if you're afraid you're going to go bankrupt, I want to know all of these fears because that way we can get in front of it and help solve them on day one. One CEO I worked with, this was probably day 45, ended up loving all of my ideas, but wasn't completely honest about the fears his team had on how to execute the change, despite the roadmap that we all created together as a team. And this is something I would want to know. And I would want to work through that discomfort because change is always difficult and it requires that transparency and those difficult conversations that might not always be roses and peaches, if you will. And to the point about discomfort, I think good CEOs are really good at being uncomfortable. Get comfortable being uncomfortable, because if you want change to happen in your business, it's never comfortable. There will be uncertainty, there will be
Right.
leaps of faith that are needed, especially if you're looking for that hockey stick effect, that disruptive change in sales versus conservative growth. Because whatever you're doing, you got to do something different if you want a different result. So if you're looking to stay in your comfort zone, I always say don't hire me, because I'm not the right person. But if someone just wants to continue doing what they're doing and have a CMO to execute, I would say that's the wrong approach. You don't hire a fractional CMO for that. It's not a good use of your funds. Maybe hire a marketing manager that can execute your vision. A fractional CMO can help give you that big picture, like Zack was talking about, and that vision that might be missing for an untapped market to stimulate growth. And then the last thing I would say is, on what to do is just be available for key decisions. So as a fractional employee, it might seem really obvious, but we're not as ingrained in your business to make decisions without any input from you yet, especially in those first 90 days. So if you have a long multi-week vacation, let's plan it such that it might be a heads down marketing working session versus decision time.
So I'm going to ask you, Jennie, I'm going to ask you a fill in the blank question. I
Mhm.
have the easy part, and then you have the hard part.
Fun.
So here's my fill in the blank question. Many clients, as fractional CMO, many clients just don't understand.
Mm. I think many clients don't understand what a fractional CMO does.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that, and also they don't understand the holistic nature of marketing and what a fractional CMO could bring. And I think marketing, it used to be analogous to putting lipstick on a pig, if you will. The CEO or product team develops a product. The
Right.
CMO is responsible for growing awareness, spending millions of dollars on a sexy marketing campaign, Super Bowl ads. Let's throw a bunch of money at it, expensive events. But more and more, I think it's also the CMO's responsibility and marketing's responsibility, because they're so close to the customer, to make a better pig, if you take that analogy. Spend money efficiently on not lipstick to cover it up, but lip gloss so that the product and the experience shine. Said differently, the CMO should also be responsible for uncovering the most unique, differentiated brand position, which might actually require product and experience improvements. It
Mm-hmm.
might not be enough, and that's something that CEOs grossly overestimate is their points of differentiation. They think that their product is the best, but what we get in and realize more often than not is that customers don't really understand the difference, why they're better, or don't care. And so if you can actually make the product a little bit better, the experience a little bit better, and do that due diligence in that first 90 days in discovery, you actually need to spend less money on marketing because people just want to use it. So, I mean, if you think about Uber, if you think about Starbucks, banks, they don't need to spend a ton of money on marketing because the product is actually category defining and solves an unmet need. And
Right.
that's something that a CMO in marketing can actually help with beyond just the campaign itself.
And Zack, what do you think? Many clients just don't understand.
Many clients just don't understand what a brand actually is, and they feel like that it's a logo or it's something visual. And honestly, as somebody who works very deep in the zeros and ones of branding, I truly believe that branding is only made up of the promises that you keep, and it's the experience that those kept promises deliver and create for the consumer. It's not about you, it's not for you. And a lot of founders love to start a business, and depending on what size they are, it's all based around them. This is my
Right.
favorite color, I want my favorite shape, my favorite name, me, my, me. And they forget to think about what problem they're solving, the people they're serving, and what experience that's creating. And that's either that's applicable across every type of business of every size, whether it's a merger acquisition, Fortune 500, a brand new startup. They all usually have no idea what a brand is. I joke that branding is a terrible brand because everyone thinks it's a logo. But ultimately, that's the biggest thing, because, again, like I said before, I truly believe that nobody buys or sells anything but brands. And I've always got case studies in my back pocket to prove it, because, there's been companies out there that have lost every asset that they have, and they've gone bankrupt, like Toys R Us. And they diluted their brand with Babies R Us and Kids R Us. And they're like, hey, forget that Amazon guy. You know what we really need next to the Legos? Diapers and changing tables. And, and it just didn't fit. And so they cannibalized themselves. But at the end of the day, their brand was purchased by Macy's. Why? They had nothing to offer except for the relationship that brand had created with decades and generations of people. The Toys R Us kids all around the world that want to go into a Macy's in the pop-up shop and give a high five to Jeffrey is what they bought. And if you really work your brand and understand the experience you're creating, you will understand more about your marketing and your sales and everything, and the value that you have in your business. And I just think that that's a fundamental thing that most people are blissfully unaware of how it works and why it's valuable and what makes it tick, and why branding is so important, almost more than marketing. Like a brand should do a lot of the selling for you.
Yep. Oh, okay. So, Zach, here's another question. You somehow got suckered into sitting at a little table at a Starbucks with 3 other people. Do they still have tables at Starbucks? Most Starbucks don't want you to hang around anymore. With 3 people who just all became fractional CMOs last week.
Okay.
Here's the fill in the blank question. New fractional CMOs need to understand what?
That being a fractional CMO is not about execution.
Mm.
It's about vision and leadership, and it's that. I think that's the biggest thing. I guess it would also depend on what they were doing previously.
Mm-hmm.
What was their role? What's their experience before they decided to jump into the fractional CMO role? But ultimately, I think that everybody that goes that is in the creative or the marketing or the branding field is in some way involved with execution for a long time. And that's what makes them good as a fractional CMO, because they've sat in all the seats. They understand how they all interconnect. They understand how they work. They understand a lot of the underlying things that affect each position. And it's hard to let go of that execution, I think, as a brand new CMO.
Right.
Because they're so used to having their hands on everything and having control. And it almost, and I feel like, especially for creatives, people who've spent so much time building their craft, to let go of that is challenging. To say, and now I started as a graphic designer, or I was a whatever, and now I'm going to be leading other teams and having to trust in those people. So I guess the first thing is, it's not about execution. And the second thing is, you have to trust your people.
And Jennie, so I'm gonna intensify the stakes for somebody, because I know that you're gonna have an opinion on this. Someone comes to you and they says, "Hey, Jennie, I worked in corporate, worked my way up through marketing, took 19 years, exited as a CMO. I don't want to go back into corporate anymore. I've looked at fractional CMO as an opportunity, and I've decided that's what I'm going to do. I made the decision last week when I was, invited not to return to work. And so, what do I need to what do I need to be careful about as I start building my business as a fractional CMO?
So I think if you are already engaged in a contract and lucky enough for that, I would say the first thing is don't treat yourself as fractional with that client. Treat yourself like you're an extension of the team.
Right.
Um, and I think the biggest thing you can leave, to Zach's point, I do think the vision and the strategy are the biggest value add. You want to have one foot in the future and one foot in the present in terms of, yes, you might have big ideas, but also you want to understand what it might take to execute and leave them with some kind of tangible roadmap for the team that they work on together. And then the biggest thing is you want to leave them smarter. You want to teach them how to fish that team. You don't want to do the work for them, but provide the exercises, the templates, the playbooks that they can use again and again during their tenure at the company and beyond. You want to teach the managers how to empower their teams in marketing, help the CEO optimize the org structure and have better relationships with his C-suites and his direct reports as well. Ultimately, you kind of want to make yourself obsolete at the end of the day versus dependent on you forever. It might sound counterintuitive, but that's what a good fractional CMO does.
Mhm.
And then while you're doing that, don't forget lead generation because you are not full-time employed. So even if you are in a full-time contract, spend 10, 15 minutes a day networking on LinkedIn or through other means that you consistently are developing your pipeline because a lot of the times new clients, it's a very long sales cycle. You're not going to get a hard sell and have someone with high intent right away. It might take 6 months or a year for you to have multiple conversations and engage with folks and build that trust to actually get hired. So make sure you're doing that on a consistent basis, even if you are working.
Okay, so Jennie, so you chose your own recording slot, day and time. I mean, it had to be a Thursday because we record on Thursdays, but you get to pick which Thursday and you get to pick which time slot. What you don't get to pick and what no one picks because it's completely randomized is who the other guest would be in the podcast. And that's one of the most fun parts about this podcast actually is that I do not curate the guests. Two fractional CMOs, often with wildly different backgrounds and experience, end up in the same podcast, kind of next to each other in the elevator. And so we're just about finishing up season 5. This is episode 123. So episode 125 would be the last one of the season. And what we're doing in season 5 is we're having these two thrown together fractional CMOs who do not know each other ask each other a question. So if you could ask Zack any question, fractional CMO to fractional CMO, what would you like to ask? And then Zack's going to ask you one.
Zach, okay. I guess. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like the questions have been, they've covered a lot of things. How do you find clients? What's your biggest challenge right now? Is it different? Is the business of being a fractional CMO different this year than last year? Or do you think it's going to be different next year than this year? There's been all kinds of questions. So you can do it, about marketing, about the business of being a fractional CMO, whatever you want to do.
Okay. That actually helped me pivot my question.
Good.
All right, Zach. So in your honest opinion, since you've been doing this for about 5 years now, what do you think the biggest advantage is from a client's perspective of hiring a fractional CMO?
Well, I think, okay, that's a great question. I think ultimately, obviously, it's a fraction of the cost of a full-time employee, right? Of a full-time person. So there's that. But also, I feel like fractional CMOs are compelled to stay more on the cutting edge of things and to really be on the bleeding edge sometimes, but really just understanding how things are working and keeping up with all the trends and having fresh and new ideas because they're not stuck in one particular spot. So they get new inspiration, they've got new influences. So I think that would be my answer.
Awesome, love it.
Yeah. And then Zack, what's your question?
So my question for you is, as a fractional CMO who has gone out on their own, how do you build a business with equity knowing that you're the product? Because now, just like you were saying before about the lead generation, you get one job and that's great, but it's hard because there's not a lot of, it's fractional. That's the whole point, right? And so as much as you've done an amazing job, you're almost working against yourself as a business. And so how do you get that longevity as a solo practitioner, trying to build that equity?
Yeah, I think really the trick is to find your sweet spot in terms of what type of project and company you're really, really good at. Me specifically, I have a lot of D2C experience, so I would never probably go after B2B clients. I really excel at that brand strategy and future proofing a brand that wants that transformational change versus someone that just wants to optimize their media mix and continue doing what they've been doing, but just slightly optimize it. So I think really being able to, again, do the brand strategy for yourself. Define what that unmet need is for your potential target client. Where might be that category white space? Because as you probably know, Zach, and you'd also, Dean, it's getting more competitive, in this fractional CMO space. So where is that white space that then dovetails with the unmet need for your clients? And then obviously, what capabilities do you have? And, you've been doing this for 15, 20, 25 years that actually are the proof of the pudding. And how do you position yourself in that way? Release content, network according to your brand values and what you have to offer versus casting this like very generic net. I think that's my personal opinion is try to find your niche within the type of CMO that you are and the type of projects and companies that need your skill set.
I can tell you that just a year ago, because my business is very much focused on fractional CMOs. Every fractional CMO sort of shows up at an engagement with basically three things in their pocket, right? They've got the experience of all the stuff that doesn't work and then all the failures. So like, let's avoid those. And then they've got their own knowledge and skill sets. Like, let's build this and do this. And then they've got like a Rolodex of specialists that they may or may not bring in for any particular project. Now, maybe on this client, you're not going to need the SEO person that you normally use, but you might need the graphics person you normally use, that kind of stuff, right? And my whole business is basically just to be one of those specialists. And this time last year, 12 months ago, when I first started the podcast, also like 10 months ago, I did a search on LinkedIn, just all of LinkedIn worldwide for the phrase, in quotes, fractional CMO, right? And there were approximately 3,000 fractional CMOs in all of LinkedIn. And I was connected to about 23, 24% of them as first degree connections. I went in a few months ago and I searched, there were 7,000 in just 10 months. And I was still connected to like 24, 25% of them. But like, that's a lot of growth. Now, granted, it's just LinkedIn, right? And it's, anybody could say that they're a fractional CMO, but just the popularity of the title, it's like that's like 100+% growth in 10 months. So, for me, it must be increasingly difficult for a fractional CMO to stand out, given that there's like an extra 10 people in the market every day.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's an interesting business to be in. Okay. So, Jennie, who should be contacting you these days and how should they do it?
Well, who should be contacting me? I think it's really any company that's in need of some type of brand or business evolution. It could be anyone from a CEO of a startup who has a blank slate and needs to define what they stand for, what their product is. I do have a background also in customer experience and new product innovation, so can help with that in addition to the marketing. Even a mid-sized company that might be, 50 million, under a billion in revenue, that is really looking to compete against like the Fortune 500 brands and is more of that challenger brand that then needs to do something a little bit different. And then obviously, most of my experience has been with the bigger brands. And so any of those CMOs that might need a right hand, that might be doing kind of a brand refresh or transformation that just doesn't have the capacity and needs a fresh perspective from someone that has done it before.
Right.
And you can all reach me at linkedin.com/in/Jennie Kaylie, which is in my profile, right as you see it.
All right. And Zack, how about you? Who should be contacting you these days and how?
Yeah, businesses that are finding that they're pouring a lot into marketing and their sales is not going up in in alignment with that, for people who are having problems with their internal culture because they're not really sure about what their values are and what their mission and vision are, and that they're not all unflappable statements that are inspiring, and the vision isn't locked into the mission, and it's not inspired by a purpose and rooted in the core values. There's a lot of things like that to really figure out exactly foundational pieces. People in the mergers and acquisition space that need an equity check on both sides before they make $1 million decisions. I liken it to, if you've got an iPhone, and if Microsoft purchased Apple tomorrow and then decided they were going to shoehorn Windows into all your Apple products, that brand promise, that experience that you were buying into, that you're loyal to, is being broken, and you're not even being considered, and you're going to lose a lot of people because of that. And there's a lot of ways that you can still work that kind of a merger, but you've got to be careful about the internal cultures. You got to be careful about where the brand stands internally and externally. And so companies that are struggling with defining those kind of things, you can absolutely call me. You can get in contact with me on pivotcreative.com, which again is in my profile here. And you can always look me up on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/Zachary Lemear. That's the best way to contact me.
All right. And I just did a quick check on LinkedIn. The total number of fractional CMOs on LinkedIn has apparently grown by about 5% in a month. It's now
I wonder if that's
it'll hit 8,000 in a few weeks from the look of it.
I wonder if that's because there's an influx of qualified people, or if it was a trend in calling yourself a fractional CMO.
It's more likely the latter, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you guys for being here. These were great answers. The questions don't change much, but the answers are always fascinating. You guys did a great job. So thanks, Jennie, and thanks, Zach.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone, for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.
Thanks for having us.